Hey everyone, and welcome back to our channel. Today, we diving into one of the most controversial decisions made by one of America's most revered presidents, Abraham Lincoln. We all know him as the great emancipator, the man who saved the Union. But did you know he also took actions that many at the time, and even today, consider a serious overreach of presidential power? Let's set the scene. It's 1861. The Civil War has just exploded, and the nation is literally tearing itself apart. Washington, D.C., the Union capital, was in a precarious position, sandwiched between the Confederate state of Virginia and the slaveholding, but still neutral, state of Maryland. Pro-Confederate sentiment in Maryland was strong. In fact, rioters in Baltimore had already attacked Union troops, and there were active plots to sabotage railroad lines and telegraph wires, cutting D.C. off from the rest of the North. Faced with what he saw as an existential threat to the nation's capital and the government itself, Lincoln made a drastic move. He suspended the writ of habeas corpus. Now, what does that actually mean? Habeas corpus is a fundamental legal principle that requires the government to bring a detained person before a judge to determine if their imprisonment is lawful. It's a crucial protection against arbitrary detention. By suspending it, Lincoln gave the military the authority to arrest and detain individuals suspected of being Confederate sympathizers, saboteurs, or spies, without charging them with a crime or giving them a court date. Initially, this suspension was limited to the rail lines between Washington and Philadelphia, but as the war intensified, Lincoln expanded it. Thousands of people, including politicians, newspaper editors, and ordinary citizens who voiced dissent against the war, were arrested and held in military prisons without trial. One of the most famous cases was that of John Merryman, a Maryland lieutenant who was arrested for his role in destroying railroad bridges. The Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Roger Taney, ruled that Lincoln had no constitutional authority to suspend habeas corpus. Only Congress could do so. Lincoln, believing his actions were necessary to save the country, essentially ignored the ruling. This raises a huge question that historians and legal scholars still debate. Was Lincoln a tyrant who trampled on the Constitution, or was he a pragmatic leader doing what was necessary to win the war and preserve the nation? His defenders argue that in a time of unprecedented rebellion, the normal rules couldn't apply. The Constitution, they say, is not a suicide pact. The survival of the Union itself was at stake, and these extreme measures were a temporary necessity to quell the insurrection. On the other hand, critics point out that jailing political opponents and suppressing free speech sets a dangerous precedent. They argue that civil liberties are most important precisely when they are under threat, and that abandoning them, even for a good cause, undermines the very foundation of the democracy Lincoln was trying to save. It's a classic conflict between national security and individual freedom. So what do you think? Were Lincoln's actions justified by the crisis of the Civil War? Or did he go too far? It's a complex issue with no easy answers, and it forces us to think about the limits of presidential power, especially in times of crisis. Let us know your thoughts down in the comments. Thanks for watching, and if you found this interesting, make sure to like and subscribe for more deep dives into history. See you next time.